Welcome to RSAC 2026. Again, I'm Doug White, and joining me today is Christy Wyatt, the President and CEO at Absolute Security. Thanks for being here.
Thanks for having us.
It was exciting to see you on my sheet. I was happy to hear from you.
We're excited. It's another RSA.
Well, yeah, any RSA that we survive, right, is like another one that
They're
we
always
get to
super
be
fun. It's like old home week.
It is. I mean, and I'll say that the broadcast alley has almost never changed.
Yeah.
So it is definitely like that, where you come back every year and go, wait, which year is this? Because I walked in this morning, I was like, will it be different? Nope. And in fact, I think our booth's in this, and I left my coffee cup, but yeah, it is like old home week here at this. You wanted to talk about downtime today, I think, because you sent me a title and said Downtime, the new economic threat. I might say, I don't know, is it a new economic threat, or is it a threat that's existed for a long time? I mean, I think maybe we're just now realizing it's as big of a threat as it is. Was that fair?
Certainly downtime is not a new thing, but I think our focus has really been on helping people articulate, where is the real loss in a cyber event? Where are companies really losing? And we get very focused on the breach itself and the bad actor and the clever tricks that were sort of involved in getting there. And we sort of lose focus when we start talking about this long tail of recovery time. And if you look at where a company's really losing money, that is how long does it take you to get your business back up and online? And so this concept of resilience is, how do we help companies really shorten that time?
Yeah, I mean, I've obviously dealt with this for a long time. I mean, as a consultant, I've had companies call me and ask me, especially early going, where they couldn't quite conceptualize it. But I remember when I worked at the Federal Reserve, they had a timer, for the mainframe being down, and you had to start the timer if the thing crashed. And that was a very expensive minute as it ticked down, and it was very frightening. And I think when I started doing audits of companies and looking at this, a lot of them didn't understand this at that level. They had a high level understanding. It was kind of like saying, my house could catch on fire. I mean, and that's a terrifying thought. And this was the analogy I used. I said, you don't want your house to burn. Okay, got it. But if it did, what would you lose? Oh, the house, okay. Well, what's in the house?
Yeah.
And then it gets weird after that.
Or the rebuilding of the house, right? I think a great to build on your analogy, right? We get very focused on what was in the house when it disappeared, but literally how long is your family going to be floating and figuring out, and you're building and you're planning? And that's when we look at organizations, and we started talking to a lot of CISOs and asking them about rebuilding the device, rebuilding the business processes, getting people back online. And it felt like there was this very disconnected conversation where we'd say, well, we're in and we're figuring out the breach. And then I'd say, well, how do you get folks back online? Especially when you have remote workers. And the answer too frequently was, well, you box up your laptops and you ship it back to the home base. And it's going to take weeks. We'll send you a new one. Or my favorite response was always, well, the tech people will take care of that. Like there was this passing of the baton on to some other part of the organization where these magical tech people would make it all kind of come back to life. And in the meantime, to your point, the clock is ticking, right? And your customers aren't being able to purchase your products. You can't make payroll. There's a ton of things that are going on. I wrote an article a few months ago talking about the cybersecurity poverty line. I think it's 1 in 5 small businesses never recover from a cyber event because they can't get back online. They've lost too much, and so it's not recoverable.
Even medium-sized businesses. I mean, every business has got some time horizon somewhere that is how long can you be down.
Yeah.
And in the early going, I was looking at things from the perspective of, well, we can probably survive. If all of our point of sale cash registers stop, the clerks will just ring it up and write it on a little pad, but that's not true today.
Absolutely.
I mean, if you're down, it could be a worldwide outage, as we see all the time, right?
Right.
And so I think your point about recovery becomes a huge part of this. I mean, it's not just when did it stop, it's how long can you stay down here? How long before your customers start finding other ways to do things, and then how long to get back up to where you have to be.
Where you can start transacting business. And our observation was that while organizations were rehearsing and having tabletop exercises around the detection and the prevention and even the stopping of the attack, this whole long tail was not as thoroughly rehearsed or tested. And so we heard all sorts of interesting stories about where those processes broke when tested in real life. And I think that's, our focus is on whether we're talking about keeping applications up and running so that they're protecting you, whether we need to rebuild devices remotely because they've become compromised by ransomware or something else. Right? How do we minimize that downtime and make sure that you can get back to your customers?
I agree with that. I mean, I think that's very, very important. I think exercising it is very important. I mean, is that something you found in your studies? Is that
we try to? We were talking earlier. We've been trying to quantify, give people a framework and a language for how we measure the value of resilience. And so we do think that the metric is really downtime, right? It's how long are you down. And against that, can we quantify, well then, where are you comfortable? And the analogy that I like to draw is sort of in the financial industry, we have very mature frameworks for how we talk about risk and fraud, and it's very clear to have very straightforward to have a conversation about what your risk appetite is and how much are you willing to absorb. I think we need to come up with those same frameworks for cyber risk and for cyber resilience so that boards can really have a conversation that says, how long can we really withstand being down? And are we investing enough to make sure that we can withstand the attack, not just the initial attack, but the entire event?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because I mean, it's very easy, at least in what I observed talking with people about these things, for them to say, it'll be fine. Like you said, the magic IT people will ride in on horses and everything will be restored. It's another thing entirely to actually deal with that kind of resilience. Because like, for instance, a client I had, I gave them a scenario. It was pretty dire, I admit. I'm a little, hyperbolic. But, I was saying, their entire data storage unit was in this spot. And I said, what if this part of the building collapsed? What would happen then? And they immediately started with the magic IT. And I said, but here's the catch. Sorry, IT guys. The IT people were in the building when it collapsed. And I was like, so now what do you do? And, and they were like, yeah. But then Hurricane Katrina happened. And that part of the building collapsed. IT people were fortunately not there, but they're not magic either. And when they went to start trying to put things back, what that company had planned with a cold site and all these things turned out to not be very effective at all. And the downtime just was like, we have no idea.
Yeah.
This may be months. And they're like, what do you mean months? And I remember a CEO yelling, not at me, but just yelling that, why can't we do it the old way? And they were all like, nobody knows what the old way was.
Yeah. Well, we're definitely not going back to the old way because I think, whatever that was, because I think, first, if we just sort of look at the last few years, right, we had the pandemic, which means we have distributed workforces. So the old way would have involved walking over to somebody's desk, maybe with a thumb drive and saying, here, let me help you. That's not really accessible to us anymore. We now have systems in, cages or in restricted areas or in people's living rooms, and so that's just not really going to be scalable. The technology is not going to be the same, right? So we've made it 5 minutes without saying the word AI, but now we have to invoke it. Sorry. The technology stack is dramatically transforming, and so now you have these other areas of risk or of opportunity, but with opportunity comes risk, where we're introducing new controls, new technology on top of these very complex stacks that were already fragile, right? And so those things are going to have good days and bad days as well. So there's not a lot like the old days anymore, right? And so we really have to think about every layer of these devices, every layer of the applications we rely on, and ask ourselves, how do we keep them up and how do we keep them running? Because we can't go back to the old way.
And there's another layer there too, I think, beyond all that. I agree with you 100%. There's another layer beyond that, which is called, what about the impact of non-localized phenomenon where an AI control engine in, I don't know, Hyderabad goes down and we rely on that completely for our stuff right here.
Yeah.
And that may be almost completely beyond our control without service level agreements with that entity. to do this, and I think we're losing that thread of service level agreements a little bit.
Service level agreements are only going to help you when you're deciding who's at fault and who needs to pay. I think
True.
and it's a good way of testing whether you can withstand, but ultimately I think independently you have to ask yourself, have I thought about how to heal things when they break? Have I thought about how to work around them when they're not available? And it's the basic stuff that we find organizations get tripped up on. I had one organization talk about how they had trained everybody with what they call their break glass scenario with thumb drives. And it was understood that, like, here's the subset of people that would need to connect first. And they would, stick this into a side of a system and boot off of that thing. Right. What they didn't realize is that thing had aged 6 months, and some of the tools that were on that were actually now out of date and no longer able to connect to their network. So they find themselves isolated and broken off. And that's what I mean about the rehearsing, right? We have to be thinking in real time whenever we're evolving our frameworks, and whether it is our how we do our work or how we protect our work, we also have to be thinking about how do we recover our work and how do we keep our business connected.
I'm glad you're saying that, because it's something I have said many, 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 many times. I've tried to force people to test many, many, many times because I got sick of hearing some litany, and here's another litany for you. 800 megahertz radio. We were doing all these disaster tests that I wrote for various emergency people. And this is not really a business downtime issue, but it's actually in some ways worse. This was a human impact downtime issue. How do we get all these agencies back up, right? And over and over. And I kept pulling the rug out from under them with all their usual. They were like, well, if that fails, we'll use our cell phones. I was like, okay, your cell phones just failed. And they're like, oh, and then it was always the same thing. We'll use the 800 megahertz radios. And so one time we got to this point and I said, I want you to get me an 800 megahertz radio and let you and I have the rest of this conversation on it. And they could not find one within the entire municipality that actually had batteries that would work. And they spent hours trying to find just 2 of these stupid things. They were dilapidated, they were rotted, the batteries had destroyed themselves. It was unbelievable. And it's just so hard to get people to go down that road and test these things. Can you restore a backup? Just show me. Don't just tell me you can, because I know you'll tell me you can. Show me. Do it. And then you get, well, we couldn't do that right now. And that can cost you, right?
Yeah.
I mean, you guys just did and you're starting to do a study that you were telling me about earlier, where you're starting to push even deeper into this.
Yeah. So our unique focus is on resilience on the endpoint. So things with keyboards predominantly, because we believe that's kind of where the user needs you the most. And so for the 6th year now, we've put out a report where we actually try to measure the fragility and the corresponding sort of resilience of these devices. Our platform is embedded in the unflashable part of the firmware, so in the hardware itself of over 600 million devices. And so when you activate us, right, we are essentially protecting the device from within. If you are relying on a CrowdStrike or an Intune or a Tanium, and you've set a policy that says protect these things, we're going to make sure that they're always working and that they're always on and that they're always installed and that they're always recovering when something goes wrong. So we measure on devices, how frequently does the critical cybersecurity applications we rely on actually fail? How many of them are on these devices? Year over year, are we seeing more or less agents on these devices? Are we seeing them more or less resilient? And so we just put out our latest report today, actually. And so the high level good news and bad news. Yes, you're going to continue to see more technology landing on these devices. I actually think that's going to just explode exponentially with the evolution of AI. So we've seen it growing incrementally year over year, but I think now as every single vendor is introducing new capabilities and new technologies, you're going to see that technology complexity explode. With complexity comes fragility, so that's when these applications break. The bad news is we didn't see that get better, right? We didn't see patching get better either, so we still see 170 plus days in terms of aging or delay in patching. So we didn't get better at that. We did not see ourselves get sort of more resilient. We did see more devices become AI ready, and we do see organizations leaning into AI. So we sort of see a little bit of this perfect storm sort of starting to brew. And my belief is that the faster that goes, right, the more organizations lean in and experiment and take advantage of all of the amazing capabilities of AI, we're going to get a lot of stuff right, and there's going to be a bunch of stuff that goes wrong. And so you kind of need to rely on your ability to, what I call the Wayback Machine, like hit the pause button and fix it quickly and get folks back up and on.
And I think one of the things about agentic AI is forcing us to start tracking at a much different level than, I mean, I've obviously been talking about high level, tracking for this kind of downtime, but what you're talking about is something, it's not that I didn't think it was important, it's just I didn't think it was doable.
Yeah.
I wasn't even getting people to adopt protection for their AD servers, let alone have the time to reach down. So you're starting to push into that space because we need to be there.
The good news is that every single device, every single PC in your organization likely already has this embedded. You just have to turn it on. And so if that means, as I said, if you set a policy that says, here are the cybersecurity applications I require in order to protect my organization, we'll make sure that they're running. If something goes horribly wrong, we can do something we call rehydration, which means we can remotely rebuild that device. So we can do a complete bit level wipe, issue a certificate, and then restore from bare metal remotely a device, hands-free.
Remote.
So whether it is a significant IT event or a ransomware attack, right? You don't need 3 weeks to package up devices and send them in and get them redone. You can do it in a matter of minutes, but you have to turn it on. Right, and I think the frustrating part for us is that this is inherent capability that everybody has access to. They just have to turn it on. So we do get a fair number of phone calls when somebody's in the middle of an event and they say, we're having an issue. Can you help us? And we're like,
if only
did you turn it
called
on?
Before.
Yeah.
If you turn it on. All right. Well, Christy, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thanks
it was a fun
me.
conversation. If you want to learn more about Absolute Security, please visit securityweekly.com/absolute RSAC. For full RSAC 2026 coverage from Cyber Risk Alliance, visit securityweekly.com/RSAC. And if you'll stick around, there's even more interviews today. I don't think there's any more from me, so you'll have to be sad. But we have other people that are not quite at the same level, but it'll be okay. And I'll be back tomorrow, so hang in there. Thanks, Christy.
Thank you.